Branded a burden by her people, she found hope in a human's hands. HFY Sci-Fi Audiobook. Before I start the story, drop a comment and let me know. Which country are you watching from? Let's begin the story. The storm struck Kepler 442b with the fury of a wounded star, ripping across the terraformed plains like a living beast, tearing metal towers from their foundations and hurling debris through the sky in violent arcs. Kael Arden braced his broad shoulders against the reinforced wall of the weather station, his scarred jaw set in grim determination as the transparent window shuddered under the assault. His hazel eyes tracked the chaos beyond, reading the storm, like a machine he'd been forced to repair 100 times before. This wasn't just bad weather. It was the grid failing again. The third collapse this month. Proof of what the administrators had refused to admit. The planet itself was starting to unravel. He pulled the emergency beacon from its cradle, clipped the scanner to his harness, and muttered under his breath, "Damn bureaucrats, one day they'll bury us all." The wind howled like a chorus of broken engines as he pushed into the storm, his boots crunching across fractured earth. Every step was a battle against the sheer force of nature turned hostile. He had patched processors, rebuilt turbines, even braced half-collapsed Atmos towers with nothing but cable and stubbornness. But this felt different. Wrong. His scanner pulsed a warning, unfamiliar frequencies cutting through the static. Through the sheets of rain and shards of debris, a flash of silver moved. Not metal, not machine, something alive. His heart stuttered as the device locked onto an erratic heat signature, humanoid, but fluctuating wildly, like reality itself. Didn't quite know what it was reading. Kael pushed harder, teeth clenched, until he reached the figure stumbling through the storm. She collapsed just as he caught her, her body weightless in his arms, her silver hair plastered to her skull by the rain, her pointed ears faintly glowing crimson against her shimmering skin marked with golden veins of light. Kael froze, breath caught in his throat. Alien. The first he had ever seen, and she was dying in his arms. Her eyes fluttered open, massive and luminous yellow, burning with pain and defiance all at once. She tried to speak, but what left her lips was not sound. It was a melody that bypassed his ears and struck straight into his mind. Images spilled into him: exile, fear, pursuit across stars. His calloused hands trembled as he steadied her against his chest. "Easy," he said softly, voice nearly lost to the storm's fury. Her skin pulsed weakly at his touch, those golden patterns flickering like fading circuitry. She lifted trembling fingers toward his jaw, almost reaching the scar carved there, but collapsed again before completing the gesture. Kael tightened his hold, his voice rough with promise. "You're safe now. I've got you." And as the storm raged around them, the man who had always fixed broken systems realized he might have just found something far greater to save. Kael Arden carried her into the weather station with careful strength, the storm slamming against the walls as if trying to rip her back from him. He laid her down on the makeshift med cot, his rough hands working with the precision of a man who had rebuilt machines 100 times. Only this time, the machine was a life he didn't understand. The medbay wasn't designed for anything alien, just human injuries and human lungs, but Kael improvised, adjusting oxygen flow, stripping parts from his terrain scanner to reprogram the life support cradle. The scanner hummed, mapping her strange physiology, and the readings nearly broke his logic. Her body pulsed with energy that defied physics, golden patterns shimmering along her skin like circuitry made of light. She stirred at last. Silver, hair drying into waves across her face, her glowing eyes locking onto him with startling clarity. "You are Kael Arden," she whispered, her voice melodic but perfectly understandable now, as if some barrier had dissolved. "Terraforming engineer, designation TF7421. Kael blinked, the specificity sending a chill through him. That's right, he said cautiously. And you are? She sat up slowly, her movements graceful despite weakness. Serenya Veyra of the Third Conclave, she said, her words trailing into something like shame. Once a seer of the Zaharian collective. Now, nothing. Kael frowned, studying her. The golden veins on her skin dimmed as she spoke, as if echoing her despair. Nothing? You crossed a storm like that and survived. That doesn't sound like nothing. Serenya pressed her hands together in a gesture that seemed both prayer and restraint. Her luminous eyes flickered. My people cast me out because of what I saw. Visions they called doom. I saw endings, collapses, chains of cause and effect leading only to ruin. They feared me, branded me a burden, a curse. Her voice faltered, the melody trembling with suppressed anguish. Kael leaned forward, resting his scarred jaw on his calloused fist, eyes never leaving hers. I've spent my life fixing things people said were broken beyond repair. Machines, grids, whole damn weather systems. What you're describing doesn't sound like doom. It sounds like analysis. You're seeing cause and effect, like a systems forecast. The words seemed to strike something deep within her. Her ears flared crimson, her golden markings brightened, and tears welled in her glowing eyes. No one has ever called it that, she whispered, as if the weight of her exile cracked under the possibility of hope. Kael offered the faintest of smiles, the kind that made the scars on his face soften. Maybe that's because they were too afraid to understand. Me? I could use someone who sees ahead. For the first time since she'd collapsed in his arms, Serenya's trembling eased. In Kael's steady presence, she felt not like a burden, but like a gift waiting to be understood. 3 days after the storm, the colony was still licking its wounds, but Kael Arden was already pushing forward, scanner in hand, Serenya at his side. The outer districts were a mess of shattered prefabs and overturned transports, but his focus was fixed on something stranger. Seismic anomalies pulsing beneath Grid 7, where ancient structures had begun surfacing from the ground. The terrain scanner beeped steadily as he led Serenya across a ridge, its screen painting a web of underground passages older than human presence on Kepler 442b. This isn't normal tectonic activity, Kael muttered, sweeping the device. Command thinks it's just old fusion cores decaying, but the readings don't line up. Serenya walked beside him with the silent grace that still unsettled him, her silver hair moving like liquid under the twin suns, her golden markings pulsing brighter the deeper they went. She stopped suddenly, placing her hand on the rock wall. There's something here, she whispered, her ears glowing faint crimson. Something resonating with me. Kael raised a brow. Resonating? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward toward a half-buried chamber. The stone gave way to gleaming crystalline matrices embedded in ancient machinery, dormant yet humming faintly. Kael's heart hammered. He had spent years crawling over the colony's failing systems, but this was older than anything human hands had built. Serenya touched the wall, and the entire chamber flared to life. Displays that hadn't lit in millennia blazed with star charts and flowing data, their symbols shifting too quickly for Kael to read. He staggered back, the scanner shrieking as power levels spiked beyond safe range. Impossible, he breathed, scarred fingers tightening around the device. This should have fried every circuit in range, but it's stable, controlled. Serenya swayed, her luminous eyes widening as streams of visions poured through her mind, amplified by the resonance of the ancient tech. Kael caught her instinctively, his arm wrapping around her shoulders, steadying her slender frame. The moment his hand touched her, the resonance changed. The lights shifted, harmonic frequencies stabilizing, power flows smoothing into perfect symmetry. The chamber wasn't just responding to her, it was responding to them both. Kael unclipped the modified fusion cell from his harness, holding it near the crystalline surface. To his shock, the cell vibrated in perfect harmony, its efficiency, readings soaring beyond anything he'd ever engineered. Serenya turned to him, her glowing eyes inches from his, silver hair brushing his scarred jaw. "Your technology," she whispered, voice trembling. "It's learning from this place. From me. And from you. Together." The closeness, the shared resonance, the impossible harmony. They were breathing in sync, two beings who should never have met now awakening something neither alone could touch. And in the shimmering light of forgotten ruins, Kael realized he wasn't just fixing a failing grid anymore. He was standing on the edge of a secret that could change their entire world. The morning after their descent into the ruins, Serenya, jolted awake in Kael Arden's makeshift lab, her ears blazing crimson as her entire body shuddered with a vision so vivid it felt like the planet itself was screaming through her veins. Her golden markings pulsed erratically, her chest rising and falling too fast and her trembling hands pressed together as if trying to hold back the torrent of what she saw. Kael dropped his tools instantly, crossing the cramped space in 3 strides. He knelt beside her, his broad frame blocking out the thin light filtering through the cracks in the wall. "Serenya," he said, voice low and steady, the same voice he used when coaxing failing machines back to life. "What did you see?" She turned luminous eyes to him, wide with terror. Not years, not decades. 43 days. Her melodic voice cracked and tears streaked down her silver cheeks. "The terraforming grid is collapsing, Kael. The storms, the tremors, the failing processors, they're symptoms of a deeper wound. The planet's core itself is unraveling." The words hit him like a hammer. He sat back on his heels, running a scarred hand through his cropped hair, mind racing. 43 days until the world he had spent his life holding together fell apart. His chest tightened. With an old memory, years ago a reactor breach he couldn't stop, lives lost under his command. That scar was deeper than the one on his jaw, and for a moment he felt it splitting open again. Serenya saw the crack in him, and her trembling eased. She reached out with fingers still glowing faintly, brushing the back of his calloused hand. "Kael, I know what failure feels like. I've lived it every day since my exile, but this isn't doom unless we let it be. My visions show pathways, threads of cause and effect. You can build answers along them." Her voice wavered but held, like fragile glass refusing to shatter. Kael met her eyes, hazel locking, onto luminous gold, and something hardened in him. The fear didn't vanish, but it became fuel. "Then we fix it," he said, jaw tightening. "You map the failure. I build the solutions. We don't let this world die." Serenya's breath caught, her ears flickering crimson again, but this time the glow felt different, brighter, steadier, filled with something warmer than fear. "Together?" she whispered. Kael's faint smile cut through his exhaustion, transforming the harshness of his scars into something almost gentle. "Always together." And as the ancient ruins hummed around them in low harmonic resonance, Serenya realized the universe had given her back the one thing she thought she had lost forever: hope. Kael Arden's workshop had never looked like this before. Once a cluttered mess of worn tools and stripped processor parts, it now thrummed with a strange new harmony. Human steel and alien crystal laid side by side, half-finished devices glowing faintly as if alive. Serenya Veyra moved through the space with quiet grace, her long fingers brushing over conduits Kael had spliced into the crystalline matrices. Each time her touch lingered, the golden patterns on her skin pulsed brighter, syncing with the humming devices. "Your designs adapt quickly," she murmured, her melodic voice carrying both awe and unease. "It feels as if they want to resonate with us." Kael tightened a bolt on a modified fusion cell, his scarred hands moving with steady precision. "Machines don't want anything," he said, though his hazel eyes flicked toward her in thought. "But maybe they respond to intent, to how we approach them." He slid the cell across the workbench, nodding for her to try. Serenya pressed her hands together briefly, then set them on the device. At once the cell's energy output surged, but instead of destabilizing, it aligned perfectly with the readings on Kael's scanner. He let out a low whistle, running a hand across his stubbled jaw. "You see the pathways before they exist," he said quietly. "I've spent years troubleshooting blind, but with you, it's like I can see the whole system breathing." Her luminous eyes flickered, widening at his words. For so long she had been cursed, feared for her visions, cast out by her own people. Now this scarred human looked at her not as a burden, but as the missing half of a solution. Heat rose unbidden, in her cheeks, her ears glowing crimson. "And you," she whispered, "you make the visions tangible. They're not just doom anymore. With you, they become hope." The words hung between them, charged and dangerous. Kael's gaze lingered longer than it should have, his chest tightening. He busied himself with the tools to hide the moment, but his hands weren't as steady as usual. He had lost people before, failed them when they needed him most. The thought of failing her, of watching that light fade from her skin, was unbearable. Serenya seemed to sense his turmoil. When she leaned close to check the calibration, her silver hair brushed against his jaw, feather-light, and Kael froze, every scar and hardened line of him undone for an instant. Her voice was barely a breath, melodic and fragile. "Kael, do you trust me?" His reply was immediate, low and certain. "With everything." Their eyes locked, hazel and luminous gold, and for one heartbeat, the world beyond the walls ceased to exist. Then the scanner beeped, dragging them both back to the reality of a dying planet. Serenya stepped back, hands trembling, but the bond had been forged. Something deeper than partnership, a resonance neither machine nor vision could measure. The resonance chamber thrummed like a living heart, crystalline walls glowing in soft waves that seemed to breathe with Serenya's own pulse. Kael Arden made the final adjustments to the broadcast array, his scarred hands moving with the care of a surgeon. Around them, the ancient ruins hummed with dormant power, awakened piece by piece over the past days as they worked side by side. Serenya stood at the center of the chamber, her silver hair cascading down her shoulders, her luminous eyes fixed on the crystalline matrix that would link her mind to every colonist across New Geneva. She pressed her hands together, not in fear, but in steady resolve. "If this works," she said softly, her melodic voice carrying a fragile weight, "they will all know me. Not as a human might describe me, but as I truly am. There will be no more hiding." Kael looked up from the console, meeting her gaze with unwavering intensity. "Good," he said, his deep voice rough but certain. "Let them see you. Let them see the truth. You're not a curse, Serenya. You're the only reason we even have a chance." The conviction in his words made her ears glow crimson, her golden markings brightening across her skin. She stepped into the crystalline circle, her slender frame enveloped in radiant light. At once the chamber blazed to life, harmonics spiraling outward in frequencies that made Kael's scanner shriek. The broadcast began. Across the colony, from the towers of the administrators to the furthest agricultural domes, every human mind was struck with her vision. They saw storms ripping across the planet, seismic fractures tearing at the foundations of their world, processors failing in cascading collapse. Terror surged like a wave. But then came the second vision: solutions. Hybrid devices glowing with impossible efficiency, resonance stabilizers balancing tectonic stress, atmospheric grids harmonized instead of failing. They saw Kael and Serenya working together, human ingenuity fused with alien foresight, not doom, but salvation. Through the link, Serenya felt the colony's emotions, fear bleeding into awe, awe into resolve. For the first time in her life, her visions were not feared. They were believed. The light dimmed at last, leaving her swaying, breathless. Kael was there instantly, steadying her, his scarred hands warm against her trembling shoulders. Her golden eyes fluttered open, finding his hazel gaze filled with pride. "They saw," she whispered, voice fragile as wind. "They believe." Kael's faint smile broke through his hardened features, softening the scar along his jaw. "No," he said gently, pulling her close against his chest. "They don't just believe what you showed them, they believe in you." For Serenya, who had once been branded a burden, the words landed like salvation, and for Kael, who had sworn never to let another world slip through his fingers, holding her felt like holding hope itself. The alarms wailed like dying beasts, as Kael Arden and Serenya Veyra sprinted through the collapsing corridors of the Meridian mining complex. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of fractured steel, the ground shuddering with every seismic ripple tearing through the depths. Garen Holt, the grizzled foreman, shouted over the chaos as emergency crews rushed past them. "Structural. Integrity's dropping fast, 30% and falling. If Junction Alpha goes, the whole grid collapses with it." Kael's scarred jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. The cascade would accelerate. Weeks lost in seconds. 43 days would shrink to nothing. Serenya's ears flared crimson as she pressed trembling fingers to her temples, her golden patterns pulsing in erratic rhythm with the tremors. "I can see it," she gasped, her melodic voice cutting through the din. "The fractures are following the path of least resistance through the old predecessor foundations, but there's a way. If we can redirect the energy into controlled resonance, the collapse can be slowed." Garen's face twisted. "Controlled resonance? You're talking about triggering the quake on purpose. That's suicide." Kael's hazel eyes cut to Serenya, his scanner already pulling data, hands moving with instinctive precision. "She's right. We don't fight the quake. We guide it." He turned to the foreman, voice steady despite the chaos. "Evacuate sectors 7 through 12. Now, leave this to us." Another tremor rocked the tunnel, sending a rain of debris cascading from the ceiling. Kael moved without thought, throwing himself over Serenya, shielding her with his own body as shards of stone and metal crashed around them. The resonance flared again where they touched, her vision sinking with his unyielding determination. When the rumble eased, Serenya's trembling hands rose to Kael's chest, her luminous eyes locking onto his. "Together," she whispered, conviction cutting through her fear. "We do this together or not at all." Kael's faint smile softened his scars. Always together. They crawled through half-collapsed passages, placing harmonic stabilizers with precise coordination. Serenya guided his every move, her foresight threading through the fractures like light through cracks, while Kael, anchored each device with the efficiency of a man who had spent his life bending failing systems back to purpose. Sweat poured down his temples, dust coated her silver hair, but neither faltered. When the last stabilizer was set, they fell back, to the control center. Kael's scarred hands flew over the console while Serenya spread her consciousness through the devices, waiting for the perfect moment. Now, she breathed, her melodic voice firm. Kael slammed the activation. For an eternity of seconds, the world held its breath. Then the resonance caught, chaotic energy flowing into controlled harmonic pulses, vibrations transforming into rhythmic waves that strengthened instead of shattered. The mining complex steadied. The collapse halted. Garen's crew erupted, in cheers, but Kael's eyes were only for Serenya. She swayed with exhaustion and he caught her, pulling her against him. Her silver hair spilled across his chest as her glowing eyes lifted weakly to his. She reached up and traced the scar along his jaw with trembling fingers, a gesture filled with reverence. "We can do this," she whispered, tears glittering. "Whatever comes next, we can face it together." Kael held her tighter, his voice rough with truth. "And we will." The sky above New Geneva burned gold as the twin suns rose, but the colony's landing platform lay under an unnatural hush. Kael Arden stood tall, dust still clinging to his work harness, Serenya Veyra at his side. Her silver hair shimmered in the morning light, her ears glowing faint red as she pressed her hands together in a gesture caught between fear and prayer. The shuttle descending before them gleamed with crystalline symmetry, a vessel of the Zaharian collective. They had come not for alliance but judgment. The airlock hissed open. 3 figures emerged, their movements ethereal, robes flowing as if woven from light itself. At their head strode Elder Thalion, gaunt and severe, his piercing eyes fixed on Serenya. He spoke directly into their minds, his telepathic voice cold as stone. "Serenya of the Third Conclave, you were cast out for visions that brought only fear and disharmony. Yet here you stand, your presence resonating with forces you cannot comprehend." Serenya's breath caught, but she lifted her chin, her luminous eyes steady. "You were wrong to call them doom," she said, her melodic voice strong though. Her hands trembled. "I saw the collapse coming, and with Kael's help I turned those visions into solutions." The elder's expression darkened. "Solutions? Or manipulations of fragile human minds? You weave fear into belief. That is no gift. That is corruption." Kael stepped forward, planting himself between Serenya and the elder's scrutiny. His scarred jaw tightened, and when he spoke, his voice was low, steady, unflinching. "With respect, Elder, you're blind. She didn't curse this colony, she saved it. 3 weeks ago we were days from collapse. Look at the resonance records. Look at the stabilizers she guided us to build. Without her, 47,000 colonists would be dead already." Murmurs rippled among the other 2 elders, one younger, her silver hair flowing like liquid moonlight, eyes wide with wonder as she regarded Serenya. The other kept his gaze cold, his mind voice sharp. "We exiled her for a reason. To allow her back is to admit our failure." Serenya's ears blazed crimson, but her voice did not falter. "Your failure was never me. It was your fear. I see threads of cause and effect, cascading futures. I warned of storms and collapse, and instead of listening, you silenced me. Kael saw what you would not. He turned what you called a curse into a key." The younger elder stepped forward, voice a gentle harmony in Serenya's mind. "Show us. Prove your claim." Kael and Serenya exchanged a glance. Trust, unspoken and absolute. Together they turned toward the portable resonance array. Serenya placed her hands on the crystalline matrix as Kael calibrated the harmonics. The chamber blazed to life, holographic projections unfurling across the sky above the platform. The colony as a living system, its fractures, its harmonies, the precise adjustments that prevented collapse. The elders stared in silence, their own minds filled with undeniable truth. Serenya's exile no longer looked like a punishment. It looked like a mistake. The holographic web shimmered above the platform like a living constellation, each thread of energy pulsing in rhythm with Serenya's golden markings. The elders stood transfixed, their eyes reflecting streams of data no human could have understood. Yet the truth was undeniable even to them. The colony lived not because the collective had guided it, but because the exile they had branded a burden had transformed her visions into salvation. Elder Thalion's gaunt face tightened, pride warring with realization. His telepathic voice cut sharp. These patterns are beyond what our seers have ever achieved, and yet you claim to control them. Impossible. Serenya lowered her hands, the projection fading, but her luminous eyes burned with certainty. Not control, she said, her melodic tone steady, echoing across the platform. Understanding. Cause and effect. Cascading outcomes. You called me a curse because I showed you endings. But with Kael, I learned they were beginnings. You feared my gift because you lacked the courage to face what it revealed. The younger elder, moon-haired and bright-eyed, stepped forward, her presence a softer harmony. She speaks true. This is not doom, it is architecture. A blueprint for futures we never saw. Elder Thalion, we were blind. The third elder frowned, voice cold. To admit this is to shatter the law of exile. To accept her is to expose weakness. Kael's scarred jaw clenched. He stepped in front of Serenya again, hazel eyes burning with defiance. Weakness isn't admitting you were wrong. Weakness is letting a world die. Because you're too proud to listen. She saved New Geneva. She saved my people. Don't you dare diminish that. The younger elder's gaze softened, shifting to Serenya. The collective owes you more than apology. Return with us. Be restored to your place, not as a burden, but as the greatest seer of our age. Serenya's heart clenched. Her hands pressed together as her ears glowed crimson, torn between the home that had cast her out and the human who had believed when no one else would. Her eyes lifted to Kael, who stood steady at her side, scars and all, his strength wrapped not in authority, but in quiet faith. She drew a trembling breath. I cannot return, she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of finality. My place is not with the collective. It is here, with Kael, with this colony. My visions belong where they are heard, where they build, not where they are buried. Silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the resonance array. Then, slowly, Elder Thalion bowed his head not in victory but in concession. Then we will learn from you, he said, his mental voice stripped of pride. Perhaps through you and through this human, we may see what we could not. The younger elder touched Serenya's arm gently, her telepathic whisper like music. No longer a burden. You are harmony. And as the shuttle's engines rumbled in the distance, Serenya Veyra stood tall, her choice unshaken. For the first time in her life, she had not been cast aside. She had chosen her own path. 5 years later, the colony of New Geneva no longer trembled on the edge of collapse. Its skies were clear, its fields alive with harvests richer than any projection had dared predict, its foundations humming in harmony with the resonance networks Kael Arden and Serenya Veyra had built together. Human engineers worked side by side with Zaharian scholars, the once isolated colony now a beacon of interspecies collaboration. But for Kael and Serenya, the greatest proof of survival was not in the bustling markets or humming power grids. It was in the quiet moments they carved for themselves. On the ridge near the Meridian Complex, where the earth once threatened to swallow everything whole, they had built a small cabin of stone and steel. And on this evening, as the twin suns lowered into the horizon, Kael sat with his arm around Serenya, the warm amber light spilling across her silver hair. The hum of the stabilized planet was a low lullaby, steady and sure. Serenya rested her head against his broad chest, her golden patterns glowing faintly in contentment. For so long those markings had pulsed with anxiety, with the burden of visions no one wanted. Now they shone in quiet peace. "Do you remember the storm?" she whispered, her melodic voice carrying gentle amusement. "The night I thought I was dying when I tried to touch your scar but was too weak?" Kael chuckled softly, running a thumb over her shoulder. "And I thought I was just another engineer patching leaks no one listened to. Turns out I was patching you instead." She lifted her head to look at him, her luminous eyes filled with warmth that still stole his breath even after all these years. "You never patched me, Kael," she said softly. "You believed me. You gave me back the strength to be more than the curse they branded me." Kael turned, his hazel gaze locked on hers, scarred features softened by the glow of the twin suns. He brushed a lock of silver hair from her cheek, his voice low, rough with all the things he had never been good at saying. "You were never a burden, Serenya. You were the gift I didn't know I needed." Her ears glowed crimson, her lips parting in a smile that trembled with joy. For the second time in her life, her hand rose to his scarred jaw, but this time, it did not falter. This time the gesture was complete. "And you," she whispered, her voice like a song. "You are the only hope I ever needed." Their kiss came as the twin sun sank below the horizon, amber light spilling across a world they had saved together. Around them the planet hummed in harmony, the legacy of two beings who had defied exile, despair, and collapse. Not human alone, not alien alone, but both, together. Their story, once whispered as doom, was now told across New Geneva as legend. The seer and the engineer, the exile and the scarred man, who had taken a storm and forged from it a love strong enough to outlast the stars. If you believe humanity always finds the way, subscribe for more HFY Sci-Fi audiobooks.